In this Stranger of Paradise beginner guide, best tips all players should know, I'm going to share with you the best tips and tricks in order to make the most out of your playthrough. This guide includes, but is not limited to, the best beginner jobs or classes, effectively leveling them up, and efficiently slaughtering enemies. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin is an action RPG developed by Team Ninja and published by Square Enix. You play as Jack, whose ultimate goal is to hunt and slay chaos with the help of the other Warriors of Light, all while getting rid of the darkness that surrounds the Kingdom of Cornelia. The game will be released on March 18th via PC, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. A big shout out to Epic Games for sponsoring this video. If you guys plan to pick up the game on the Epic Game Store and want to support the channel, be sure to use our link below. In Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, you're able to take on 2 jobs at the same time. You can freely swap between them regardless of whether or not you're in combat. This means that your playstyle completely changes when you switch battle sets, which corresponds to the gear you're wearing for specific classes. Since there are 2 jobs to juggle, it's important to know the ones that are easier to play, especially while you're still learning the ropes. Let's start with the best beginner classes in Stranger of Paradise. Stranger of Paradise features a ton of jobs spread out as basic, advanced, and expert jobs, but in this section we're going to narrow it down to the best basic jobs to focus on as beginner. These include the Swordsman, Sword Fighter, Mage, Lancer, and Marauder classes. The Swordsman is a very strong class that takes a lesser amount of break damage. Because of Spinning Slash, a Swordsman can deal massive slashing damage against bosses and effective AoE damage against mobs. The Sword Fighter is the only melee class that can parry heavy-hitting attacks with ease thanks to Interception. All you have to do is activate this before the enemy hits you. Doing so will automatically counter their attack, leaving them open to taking damage. The Sword Fighter is also as durable as the Swordsman since the damage they receive is less compared to other jobs. The Mage is a decent class with the ability to cast spells from afar. Note that the longer the corresponding cast time of these spells is, the stronger they become. The Mage is more effective when you also trigger Resonance to force the target's attention away from you and to instead focus on your companions, letting you cast deadly spells from a safe distance. Moreover, while you're casting them, you recover a steady amount of MP, which is vital to execute powerful abilities. The Lancer is another ranged class which lets you effectively pierce enemies from afar. This is an incredible way to initiate combat since you get the upper hand before it even starts. What's more is the Lancer has passives that allow Jack to recover his break gauge fairly quickly while dealing massive break damage himself. The Marauder is somewhat similar to the Lancer and it deals huge break damage with an axe while inflicting status effects. As such, you'll be able to put your enemies down quickly. In Stranger of Paradise, there's a certain attribute that you can target to instantly destroy an enemy even if they still have a lot of HP left. This is known as the break gauge, or the yellow bar underneath their HP. Focusing on fully depleting this break gauge by maximizing the amount of break damage you deal is essential to your level of progression, MP management, and survivability. The faster you kill an enemy, the safer you'll be. In addition to break damage, you have to identify their respective weaknesses by observing the type of damage which will cause them the most harm. For instance, some enemies take more slashing damage, so wielding the katana and attacking them face to face is very effective. If you're facing a Tonberry, you can cast Water Gun to significantly damage it from a distance. These are just some examples you can take note of as you test out different weapons you have. There's no shortage of these in the game anyway. Another technique, regardless of the type of creature you're up against, is executing critical hits by targeting their backs. This is a surefire way to inflict considerable damage since they're all highly vulnerable against this type of attack. The Lightbringer, which is available to every class, is a powerful command ability. When you hit enemies while in this state, you significantly damage them and decrease their max break gauge as a result. Because of this, they don't recover as effectively as before, weakening them further and enabling you to kill them rather quickly. You can also become temporarily invincible against their hits. Lightbringer is best used only when you're surrounded by multiple enemies or when you're facing a mini-boss in order to maximize your efficiency since it costs at least 2 MP bars to activate. The break gauge isn't only available to the creatures you encounter since you also have it. If you take a significant amount of damage, your break gauge will be fully drained, but you won't get instantly killed by your enemies with a single lethal attack. Instead, you'll become immobile for several seconds. In this state, you're extremely vulnerable to incoming damage, especially if your HP is already less than 50%. Additionally, with a depleted break gauge, you not only lose all buffs, but also your max MP decreases, thereby restricting you from making use of stronger abilities. To prevent it from happening, you should remember to immediately switch to your second job by hitting Y on the Xbox controller or triangle on PlayStation if the break gauge of the first job is dangerously low, at say 20%. Remember that each of the 2 jobs has a full break gauge, so it's a good idea to swap between them while waiting for the other to regenerate over time. To protect yourself while staggering enemies in the process, you're going to have to activate Soul Shield by pressing B or circle on PlayStation. With Soul Shield, you're able to steal the most recent skill enemies have used against you, particularly any purple ability depicted above their head. This will then become your instant ability. You can either keep it for later or immediately use it against them. I specifically mentioned purple abilities since both mobs and bosses also make use of red abilities, which you won't be able to acquire nor guard yourself from. When you're about to be hit by these, make sure to evade towards another direction because they have the potential to break or even kill you. However, note that Soul Shield isn't foolproof either, so remember to be cautious because remaining in this stance for too long will greatly diminish your break gauge. Regardless of whether or not you're wearing a decent amount of armor, blocking hits effectively, or using the Soul Shield, some magic attacks will still damage you, especially if they're persistent. One example is the Tonberry's Everyone's Grudge ability. If you constantly get hit by the same type of magic attack, even if you weren't initially vulnerable to it, you, unfortunately, take greater damage per attack. Additionally, the chance that you receive its corresponding status effect increases as well. When you're about to face creatures who are adept at casting spells, use Soul Shield and then immediately roll towards an area to take cover. This way, you not only gain an instant ability, but you also mitigate the damage you receive. Rather than managing your stamina as in Neo, Stranger of Paradise lets you take care of the amount of MP you consume using your job, combo, and command abilities. These are usually unique and powerful action abilities that are distinct to specific classes. Since they consume at least 1 bar of MP and you typically start with 2 maxed bars per mission, you have to learn how to manage them well. To restore and increase your max MP, you have to frequently execute Soul Burst against broken enemies. In some cases, when you're too focused on combat, you might accidentally eliminate them by bashing them with multiple abilities. Be sure to stop yourself the moment you see your targets incapacitated, otherwise you won't receive as much MP if you simply slay them without activating your finisher. Another way to gain a significant amount of MP is to block incoming attacks with Soul Shield. Specifically, try to focus on ranged attacks such as fire spells, which are easier to block and counter compared to melee ones. The more powerful the enemy's skill is, the more MP you get back. This may be a minor action, but destroying boxes and fragile objects you come across along the way while you're exploring different locations helps to boost your MP even by just a small bit. It eventually accumulates, especially at the end when you're about to face the mission's boss, if you don't die, that is. Every time you kill a monster, open a chest box, and complete the main and side missions, you receive chunks of equipment. As you'll notice, some don't have job affinities, meaning they only provide stats related to physical attack, physical defense, magic attack, and magic defense. Meanwhile, there are other gear that are associated with certain job affinities which you should be farming for. When affinities for a certain class, say a warrior, adds up, you gain job affinity bonuses which further enhance your overall build. Using the same example, if your warrior reaches more than 160%, Jack will receive plus 75 HP, plus 6 strength, and plus 4 stamina thanks to Warrior's Wisdom 4. This improvement will be much better for you in the long run compared to equipping gear just because its corresponding level is higher. You should also invest in passive that grant extra job affinity percentages, as they will help you to achieve every milestone possible in your chosen class. Now, if there's another job which you'd like to level up in addition to the 2 that you cycle between, you can opt to wear equipment corresponding to its affinity. Although it won't progress as fast as the other 2 jobs, you'll still be able to level it up gradually. This becomes advantageous since you need to significantly progress in multiple advanced jobs before gaining access to expert jobs. Before entering missions, it's a good practice to visit the Smithy beforehand, which you can access from Cornelia via the world map. The Smithy allows you to dismantle unnecessary items and in doing so provides you with materials. These materials can then be used to upgrade the equipment you like to often wear. When you upgrade them, you're able to permanently enhance their effects such as strength, slash damage, and HP. By default, Jack can hold up to 500 pieces of gear, including that of his companions. When you're doing missions, you have the option to dismantle equipment upon reaching cubes or rest points, but you won't be able to acquire materials you would otherwise obtain from the Smithy. Leveling up a job can take some time, especially when you're nearing the max level, which is 30. Although this is not a hard requirement in the game, it's still good to know the activities you can do at the beginning to farm for as many job points as possible when you transition from basic and advanced jobs to expert jobs. Aside from completing main missions, you want to keep farming side missions as well. You can gain access to this type of quest as you progress in the story and upon interacting with purple orbs, otherwise known as memory mementos from fallen strangers who have attempted to search for the coveted light crystals in the past. Completing side missions and playing online with others will grant you a high number of anima shards. Per shard, you're able to gain 4,000 XP without manually leveling up the job you intend to progress in. Additionally, you can also search for spots near cubes, which are filled with creatures since they randomly drop shards. Every time you activate a cube, all the enemies respawn, so the idea is to go and kill them and then interact with the rest point, rinse, and repeat. If you enjoyed this Stranger of Paradise beginner guide, be sure to check out our Stranger of Paradise review if you're curious about the game. What did you think of the guide? Will you be playing Stranger of Paradise after Elden Ring? Let us know in the comments below. And thanks again to Epic Games for sponsoring this video. If you intend to pick up the game on the Epic Games Store, make sure to use our link below.